Prime-time local news, serving the Lakeland and Midwest regions.
The Eco 9 class at E.S. Laird Middle School recently won a grant for $5,000 for the Going the Distance project. We spoke with Eco 9 teacher Sean Donald on what this donation will be used for. I'm joined here with Sean Donald, and he is the Eco 9 teacher. Now, the Eco 9 program recently received a grant for $5,000 from the Going the Distance project. Can you explain what this project is?
So Going the Distance is a project that myself and another teacher here at the school created. And it's through Inside for Education, which is a nonprofit in Alberta. And this program that we're creating is to introduce students to bike maintenance so that they can use their bikes, fix up their bikes. And then we're going to be doing some mapping and math exercises while we're biking. So with the Eco 9 class, we do a lot of trips. And we're trying to do more of those trips using our bikes instead of using buses or cars. So this grant enables us to maintain our bikes and travel around the city to different locations, mapping it, and then figuring out how much fuel and energy we're saving by using our bikes instead of cars or buses.
Now, with this program, you mentioned that you're using bikes, but also we aren't in school right now. So are kids able to do this program from home?
So this program is starting up. The grant starts in the fall. So it's not for this year's class. It'll be for next year's class. If things don't start in the fall, then we will see what we can do to make the grant work for our students at home. And myself and Aaron Klatzen, who also runs the program, are starting to think of different ways that we can do that, just in case things don't work out for us in the fall.
And why did you want to feature bikes and showing these students that bikes can really work as a second mode of transportation?
With the Eco 9 program, one of the things that we do is we try and get students out and being active. A very hands-on program. And instead of sitting in a classroom all the time, we like to get out and view things in our community. So instead of taking a bus across town, we figured that biking would get us there, but it's also healthier for us. It brings in parts of our phys ed curriculum. It gets students to be active and also be a part of your community. You get to see a lot more of town when you're biking around than you do when you drive around. You miss a lot of stuff. So as we're biking, sometimes we stop at different places and talk about park that's here, or some people do special decorations around their house. So it gets us to be involved in the community as well, instead of just driving by.
Now, even though we aren't in school, and with the past classes semester, is there ways that you engaged with them when they were at home?
Yeah, so we've been doing online education, just like the rest of the province has been. So our program, being a very hands-on, interactive class, it's been challenging to move that into an online, sitting-down, computer-based program. But we've taken a lot of the programs and projects that we do in ECO and adapted them so students can do them at home. And then we're meeting up with the students twice a week on internet calls. And then myself and Ms. Klatzen are available pretty much all day to answer students' questions and go through emails and help direct students when they need it when they're working from home.
And when you tell these students about the bike programs and what you guys do with them in classroom, what is their reaction to this?
There are quite a few students who really like it. It's one of the reasons they join the program, not for the bike specifically, but because we do things a little differently. So we take the curriculum and we move it to more hands-on. And biking is just one component that lets us get out of the classroom, stretch our legs, get some fresh air, have a little bit of fun, and do things differently than just sitting in a classroom.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sean.
As part of a plan that has been years in the making, the City of Lloydminster will be submitting an annexation application to the Alberta Municipal Government Board for the annexation of lands from the County of Vermilion River after talks stalled with the county.
The city had done what we call our homework, I guess, and the county had done theirs, and we couldn't arrive at a resolution for the compensation package for the land. And from that perspective, we felt that it was best to send it to the MGB and give them, that's the duty of the municipal government board at that point, to help assist municipalities that can't arrive at an amiable resolution to that matter.
The city's new wastewater treatment facility also took a step forward on Monday as the city entered into the integrated project delivery contract.
The individuals around the table will work together for the betterment of the project. One of the where you realize savings, first of all, is that it helps move the project forward, as the project's being in the stages we're designing now, rather than working with everybody through the design process. So that, as an example, the general contractor can comment to the project engineer that that may not be the best solution based on our history. We've seen this work better. Take it back to the engineer and make those changes right into the drawings, and it's very collaborative, versus the conventional model is more confrontational, in my opinion.
The city has been placed on a deadline to finish the project by December 1st, 2023, a month earlier than had been hoped, but the mayor is not concerned about losing those 30 days.
Fair enough, 1 month. If we hopefully have everything up and running very smoothly by midsummer, and it'll be a formality. Just every month is just that window of, gives you a little bit more of a window. But I think that based on COVID as an example, without going back today needing an extension, that if we were at November 15th and we were basically 1 month away from full commissioning, I don't see a problem. I'm hoping there wouldn't be a problem with the Environment Canada and the regulators provincially and federally from that perspective. But you take what you can get, and we got till December 1st of 2023, which is so close. I think we'll be fine.
Council also approved a purchase of $101,100 for personal protective equipment for fire services in the city, which will be dual purpose for both structure and wildland firefighting, something the mayor says is needed here in the city.
We are surrounded, and we have a huge park right in our city. Blood Miller Park is not considered it is in an urban setting, but in essence, there's grass that is not mowed regularly. So there is, and we have trees and things like that. So basically, as we continue to do, as the city grows and there's land with grass on it, they've gone to a dual application, such as the boots, as an example, for fighting fire, that it's good in both in structural firefighting as well as wildfire fighting.
The purchase will be spread over 3 years so that the equipment does not need to be replaced at the same time. Eric Bay, Primetime Local News.
So I'm joined today with Craig Baird. He is the host of the Canadian History X podcast. And thanks for taking some time to talk with me today.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
So just starting off, for people who don't know much about you, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and maybe talk a bit about the podcast?
Sure. Well, my name is Craig Baird, and I host, like you said, Canadian History X. I've been hosting the podcast for about 2 years now, and it's about 3 episodes a week. I talk about Canadian history, all aspects from simple little stories about farmer who came to an area to larger stories about rebellions, wars, and many other things. And like I said, I've been doing it for about 2 years. I do a YouTube channel as well, where I put out videos on Canadian history as well. But as for myself, my background's in journalism before I started doing podcasting full time.
And so the reason I'm talking to you today is because you're going to be having a Zoom conference later on in June relating to the Bar Colony Expedition. And so can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
So I was always been kind of fascinated by the Bar Colony and the expedition out west, just because it's such a great story with Isaac Barr. He recruits all these people to come out west to create this all-English colony. He partners with a man by the name of Reverend George Lloyd, and it quickly kind of grows into this massive expedition. It's mostly people who are middle class and urban who aren't used to homesteading, things like that. And it just has such a great story because it combines two things that I love about Canadian history. On the one hand, you have kind of that foolhardy let's just go out and see what we can do. And, we might succeed, we might not. And you have that with these colonists who are hauling pianos and fine china from Saskatoon by ox. But then you also have that determination to succeed no matter what. And even though these people were urban, middle class, weren't used to farming, they still succeeded. They get to Lloydminster, or to what would one day be Lloydminster. By that point, they've already told Isaac Barr you're not the leader anymore. They didn't like him. They blamed him for the weather, the high prices. They didn't like his personality. And just that great story of how they start they start aligning themselves with George Lloyd, and then name the community after him, and create this community that's one of the most important communities in Alberta and Saskatchewan now. And it all starts kind of from a dream by a guy who took a bit too much, and in the end he didn't succeed, but the colonists did.
And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about where you kind of, for someone who's doing all history podcasts and talking about a whole bunch of Canadian history, how do you do your research, and how do you kind of find these interesting stories to tell?
Well, Canada has many great historians like Pierre Burton, who have written some just wonderful books about Canadian history. And then there's online resources where local history books have been scanned, every single page, hundreds of them online, and you can just read them and search through them. And then there's so many sources, even just things like ancestry.com, where you can find so many great stories. And sometimes, great stories just happen to pop up. I was watching a National Film Board documentary about a man by the name of Ken Carter, and he was this daredevil in the 70s who wanted to take a rocket car and jump over the St. Lawrence. And it was such a fascinating story. And so that was an episode that I did about him, because it was kind of that, again, that Canadian spirit of, at times we can be foolhardy, but then, he's very determined to launch this rocket car. And so we get that determination as well. And so with the internet, there's a wide variety of sources. Plus, I often do interviews with historians or people who may have been involved in something I'm talking about, like Terry Fox. I talk to the people who were on the Marathon of Hope with him. And so I kind of get that personal perspective. And then there's just so many archival audio interviews from National Film Board, CBC, going back 70 years, that are a great resource that help me a lot when I'm putting together the podcast and the videos.
And for someone who's going to be taking part in this Zoom conference, what will they be kind of getting themselves into, and how are they able to sign up to participate?
Well, it's going to be about, I'm hoping about 45 minutes, and then with questions and everything, hopefully get to about an hour. And so the Zoom conference, it's going to center on pretty much the start of the Barr Colony expedition, kind of looking at Isaac Barr, who he was, and looking at George Lloyd, the two leaders, and following the expedition as it journeys from Liverpool to Montreal, the train to Saskatoon, the hauling everything by ox to what would eventually be Lloydminster, and then just a little bit about what happened to both those men afterwards. So I kind of want to just kind of take everybody along on the journey, which was at times good and at times horrible for these people, but in the end it succeeded. And if they're interested in taking part, it's June 29th at 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And it's open to anybody. The registration is $10, and you can just email me at craig@canadaehx.com, and I can get you all set up and invited for the conference.
Perfect. And thanks for taking some time to talk with me today. And if people want to take some more time to listen to some other stuff of yours, they can, of course, search the Canadian History X on YouTube or on Google, and they can find a lot more resources from you. So it was great to talk with you today.
Furniture set and design supplied by Furniture Gallery and Furniture House, downtown Lloydminster.
As summer is approaching quickly, rainy days will come. With it could lead to potential flooding in some homes. Connor Chan gets some tips on how to prevent your home from being flooded.
Jody Herbis from BioClean Disaster Services joins me today. Jody, first off, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on the show tonight.
With all that rain that we got here this past weekend, what were some of the common calls that you got?
Connor, we always seem to get the same question, so I'm glad you asked that. One of the first things that we hear is, we don't have a sump pump in our basement, and our basement is flooding. So one of the things to know about our Lakeland area, it's called Lakeland for a reason. We have a lot of groundwater. If a person doesn't have a sump pump, I hear the common response, well, we've never had a flood up until now. That's true, but it is simply a matter of time. So to any of your listeners out there, any viewers, they should definitely look at installing a sump pump, a proper sump pump into their basement to prevent these things from happening. And then one of the other questions we get all the time is, we don't know if we have insurance coverage. So I think that's a good reminder and a good wake-up call to a lot of people, including renters, because rental properties can flood just as well, and renters need to carry their own rental insurance. So check your insurance policy, make sure it covers water damage, sewer backup, flooding damage. And if it doesn't cover that, or if it's got a limit on it or a restriction, talk to your insurance broker about what it's going to take to perhaps get you that type of coverage.
Now, for those that may not have a sump pump in their basement, how can people prepare and prevent in terms of outside of their homes? And if water does get into the house, what major hazards can arise?
Man, those are two excellent questions. So one of the first things that you mentioned there is, what can you do on the outside? If you know that a rainstorm is coming, and hey, we're going to get them all the time, walk around the outside of your house. Check your eaves trough and make sure, is my eaves clear? Is it working properly? Are my downspouts working properly? It's a very minimal investment to get what is called downspout extensions that help the rainwater get even farther away from your house. So look at those things. Look for leaky windows. You know what? I've had some clients, they take a garden hose early on this spring, they spray down areas of their house just to see if there's any leaky spots. Check your shingles if you can see them from the ground and you see their shingles lifting, or they're old and they're curling. Maybe now is the time to invest in some new shingles to prevent water from coming in. So number one is walk your house and check for preventative measures. Then the second thing you mentioned, is there any potential dangers or things to look for? Absolutely. If water comes into a mechanical room, a room where there's perhaps electrical panels or furnaces and things like that, and starts to rise, that can become a danger to you. So watch out for that. If you do sense a danger, don't enter the area. Call a professional. Call up an HVAC company that deals in furnaces and hot water tanks. Call up an electrician and say, there's water coming onto my electrical panel. What should I do? If it's safe for you to enter, absolutely, maybe go turn off some breakers or check some things like that. But if you don't feel safe, don't enter the area.
How many calls on average would you say that BioClean gets per year about these types of situations?
Man, it can vary anywhere from a couple hundred to some days it seems like almost 1,000. I know that's a lot. We've had just a busy weekend with all these rains going on, and again today. Probably in our Lakeland area, I would speculate just for all of the disaster companies in this area, at least several hundred, probably into the several thousand per year. Last year was a bit slower in our area, but this year it looks like it's going to be another busy rainy season.
When your team is out on location, is your team still practicing those safety measures in terms of social distancing and wearing masks and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. And some clients have delayed us from entering their premises until they feel fully reassured. And that just makes sense in this time. We want to make sure that not only do you feel safe when you're having a flood or some other situation going on, but also safe when you have to interact with people during these unusual times.
And lastly, what's the best piece of advice you can give to homeowners to prevent any type of flooding?
You've invested so much into where you're living. You've either invested into the contents for where you live as a renter, or if you own a property, you've invested in that. You've spent a lot of time in your mortgage, a lot of money in your mortgage. Go protect your property. Walk your property on a fairly regular basis, at least a few times per year. If you notice a trouble spot, don't ignore it. Troubles with houses are always going to get worse before they get better.
Well, Jody, I really appreciate your time sharing that insight on how people can protect their homes. So thank you very much.
Welcome back to the show, Zoe. It's great to see you again for another week of Pet Project. Who have we got in here today?
This here is Kimmy. She is a 1.5 years old. She came in as a stray with her 2 brothers. She was found under someone's deck in Marlene.
And how is she as far as personality goes? From what I've seen, she looks to be kind of chill. She was hanging out off camera here, I saw while we were getting ready for the interview. Is she pretty nice around people?
Yeah, she is quite an affectionate cat. She gets really cuddly. Of course, she's still only a 1.5 years old, so she does get a bit playful at times.
That's beautiful. And so how are you guys doing for other cats right now? Are you guys still pretty full? I know last week you had a lot of kitties. So how are you doing this week?
We're still about the same. We still have a fair amount of cats like always, but they're slowly but surely going through and getting adopted.
Well, that's good to hear. And for dog numbers, how are you guys doing for dogs?
So for dog numbers, we're actually doing fairly well. We have only one new face here, but we have adopted out 4 dogs in the past week.
Oh, wow, that's great to hear. And so I know that we're slowly coming up on the next stage of the Reopen project. So is anything changing for you guys, or are things going to continue as they have been, where, you know, you make an appointment and then you call to come in to see the animals?
Everything's the same as of right now. We aren't changing our policies as of yet. So everything's still booked by appointment if you want to see any of the animals. And then any strays as well is booked by appointment.
Beautiful. And I know obviously it's so hard to plan fundraising in these turbulent times, but do you guys have any plans for this summer coming up yet, or are you guys just waiting to see how things go?
Yeah, we're still waiting to see how things go. Basically, we're waiting for the museum in Bud Miller to announce if they're having any special events going on. That's mainly where we have our summer events, and possibly some barbecues as well.
Beautiful. Okay, and now obviously, even though you guys aren't having fundraisers, you guys still need donations to keep running because you are a nonprofit. So if anybody out there wants to perhaps give you guys a monetary donation, or to, you know, drop off some cat food or some dog food, because the pets, you know, they always need to be fed, how do they go about doing something like that, Zoe?
For item donations, they can just drop off on the doorstep, and then we can bring it inside once, you know, they've left the items there. Any monetary donations, we ask that book an appointment as well, just so we can get you into the shelter, and we're not doing it through the door or anything like that.
Beautiful. Well, I think that's all for us this week, Zoe, unless you have anything else to add.
Not at this time.
All right, beautiful. So if anybody out there would like to see our, you know, cute cat, go in and meet it in person, you can go ahead and make a call, make an appointment, or to see any of the other lovely animals that they have. You know, the pets don't stop needing homes just because we're in a bit of a pandemic. So thank you so much, Zoe, for speaking with us again this week, and we look forward to talking with you again next week.
Sounds good. We'll see you then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.